I mean, it can't be that hard. You're just going in a straight line. What's going on, guys? Welcome to Budget RC. I've been wanting to build a no prep RC drag car for a while. It's a segment of the hobby that I've been really following for quite a while, and I finally decided to take the plunge when I found out that you could get an IROC Z body. I have an 85 IROC. I've had it since the 90s. It's the one car I'll never part with. And so when I found out that there was a scale body available, I decided that one way or another I had to build a car. Once I got going, I realized it's no fun to drag race yourself, so I decided to build a second car so that my son and I can start doing some racing. If I'm going to have an IROC body, it only makes sense that the second body should be a Fox body Mustang. So I decided to build two cars that are similar but not identical. I wanted to take you through what these cars are, what they have in common, and then how they differ. Both of these vehicles are 5th generation team associated based vehicles. They're both short course in length, but they differ in their width along with some other things. One of these started as an SC5M and pretty much stayed that way. The other one started as a B5M, but had the short course chassis added to it to provide the extra length, but still has that buggy width. You can probably see here that this vehicle is not as wide as this one. And that's because, like most of these drag race specific bodies, this J-Concepts Mustang is designed for a 12 3/4 to 13-inch wheelbase like a short course truck, but it's narrower to fit the buggy width. This IROC body from Delta Plastics, on the other hand, is designed to fit a stock short course vehicle. The length and the width are both standard short course sizes. And so that's why we have a little bit of difference between the two vehicles. I'm going to go in depth about some of the other differences between these vehicles, but first I want to talk about what's similar and why I chose this chassis in the first place. So right now you can see we've got the body installed. I've got a set of the Proline Hoosier drag tires, and they're mounted to the J-Concepts drag wheels. I like this combination. I think it looks pretty good, and hopefully it'll work out well. If we pull the body off, you can see underneath is the SC5 chassis. Let's take a closer look. So what we have here is a pretty typical setup for a no prep drag car. We've got the short course length chassis with the buggy arms, shocks, and shock towers. This is a pretty standard setup for this type of vehicle. It helps keep it somewhat narrow. It has a limited suspension travel, and it's still got the longer wheelbase. Like I mentioned before, we've got the Proline tires mounted to the J-Concepts wheels. So most of the people that run these types of cars seem to gravitate toward the slash chassis, which I think is probably a good idea considering almost everybody has a slash laying around in their pile of vehicles. I went with the Team Associated for a few different reasons. First of all, I'm just a big fan of Team Associated. I like their vehicles, I like how they go together, and generally parts are readily available. Secondly, I went with this vehicle because I'm familiar with it. I've had a T5M for a while, so I'm familiar with the platform. Thirdly, because this is an older platform, you can pick these up really cheap. It's not hard to find a B5M for about $100. So the next big reason that I gravitated toward this platform was because I really wanted a mid-motor setup. One of the issues I've seen with a lot of these drag builds, especially the slash-based build with a rear motor configuration, is that they end up being somewhat uncontrollable with a lot of power. And that makes a lot of sense. When those vehicles wheelie, the front wheels come off the ground and you can't steer. A lot of guys have the wheelie bar installed, but you're still facing a situation that when you're up in the air, you can't steer the vehicle. Likewise, down the other end of the track, when these tires start to expand, the vehicle becomes a little bit uncontrollable. So you've got some issues that you need to overcome. By going with a platform that uses a mid-mounted transmission, I'm really hoping to help keep more weight up front and have a vehicle that stays more controllable throughout the entire run. Most off-road racing platforms now use that type of a mid-mounted motor setup. The reason I gravitated toward this generation of team associated truck is because I know that these vehicles were available with a 3-gear or a 4-gear transmission, so that gives me more options. Because this is my first time getting involved in this area of RC, I wanted something that was going to give me a little bit of flexibility. Having the option of a 3-gear or a 4-gear transmission does exactly that. Now, one drawback to this specific platform is that because it is a little bit older platform, some of the parts have been discontinued and may be hard to get. I've already run into some problems with obsolescence, specifically being able to get the short course chassis. Because I converted this vehicle from a buggy, I needed to get the chassis and this chassis brace. Chassis brace is still available, but the chassis itself has been discontinued. Fortunately, I was able to get a brand new one from somebody. Some of the other parts that have been discontinued include arms, some of the towers, some of the steering components. They're discontinued too. Fortunately, a lot of these parts are interchangeable with some of the other team associated vehicles, like the DB10 and the new DR10. They're both based on the 5th generation platform as well. They use a rear-mounted motor setup with a plastic chassis tub, but a lot of the bolt-on parts are the same. So even though they may not be the exact same plastic compounds as what's available on this vehicle, you can still get replacement parts. So now let's talk about what these vehicles have in common. Most of my electronics in these two vehicles are the same. I decided to start with the Mamba Monster X speed control for both of these vehicles. And there are a couple of reasons that I decided to go with this. I've got the Mamba X speed controls in some of my crawlers, and I really like that auxiliary function that allows me to take some specific aspect of control and bring it right to a variable switch on my remote control. On my crawlers, I do it to adjust my drag brake. On these vehicles, what I want to be able to control is the torque management. One of the things that you can control via the auxiliary wire on these speed controls is how much torque it applies to the motor. That's going to be a really useful feature in helping me dial these vehicles in. Especially because one of these is going to be driven by my son, I want something that's going to be good and controllable. Now, a lot of these speed controls allow you to have adjustable torque curves, but they have to be adjusted via the software. I want something that I can adjust right by the remote control so that based on the conditions of that day, we can just dial in a little bit more torque or a little bit less torque in order to maximize our acceleration, but still have a controllable vehicle. The reason I went with the Monster X instead of the Mamba X is just because I wanted to make sure that we're able to provide enough current to that motor without stressing the speed control. Now, in terms of the motors themselves, I went with a Hobbystar 4-pole censored motor. This is a 550 sized can and it's 4300 kV. It's not a real high kV compared to what some of these guys are running in their drag cars, but this 550 can should be able to provide a ton of torque, and if I need to gear up to get to the speeds I need, this motor should be able to handle it no problem. Because this is a big 550 can, it's going to suck a lot of current, which again is why I wanted to have that extra margin from the Monster X speed control. Now for the controller, I'm going to go with my tried and true Radio Link controllers. I've been using these controllers on most of my latest vehicles. I like them and they're really cheap. The controller that I'm going to use on my car is the older Radio Link that doesn't have the gyro in it. This vehicle here is going to be controlled by the Radio Link that I use for my son's vehicles, which do have the option of the gyro. If he's having problems with controlling the vehicle, we may be able to utilize that gyro just to help make it more controllable for him. As he gets better, we can dial it back out until he's using it in a more normal sense. Now for servos, I do have a little bit of difference between these two. I've got an old Turnigy Trackstar in this vehicle here that I'm going to be using. It was one that I had around. It's a good servo and it was inexpensive. Over here I've got a Savox servo. The reason I'm using that is because it actually came with this vehicle when I bought it. It seems like a nice servo and there was no reason to change it. Now in both cases with the suspension, I've got these designed to run in quite a droop configuration. If I put some weight on here, you can see how much of a droop I have, and that's even without the battery. Right now I have the preload set up on the shocks so that these tires fit nice and tight up in the wheel wells right where I want them. In this configuration, I still have some more room for suspension travel as I load up the rear end. Additionally, because I've got a lot of preload on the front, I've got a lot of room for the suspension to droop during that weight transfer in hopes of keeping those front tires in contact with the ground even when I get my weight transfer. You can see that I've got the Mustang set up more or less the same way. If I set this here, we've got quite a bit of droop, and when we get weight transfer, we can go quite a ways with those front tires still touching the ground. So now let's talk about some of the differences between these vehicles. The first and most obvious one that you can see is the wheel and tire package. On the Mustang, I've got the more common drag-based system that uses a buggy-sized wheel and tire in the front and a short-course-sized wheel and tire in the rear. On this vehicle, you can see that I've got 2.2 wheels all around, and I don't have any tires yet. A couple of things I wanted to do with these vehicles in addition to drag racing them is to make them more of like a GT or touring style vehicle as well. I want to keep these as realistic looking as possible and not just give them that drag race look, especially with the Camaro. One of the things about this Camaro body is that you can see that it has very large wheel well openings. If you put this body on here, you can see that especially those front tires just really seem to get lost in this body. Even if we pull it out to make it more of a normal wheel depth, you can see that that front tire is just too small. So what I want to do is be able to run a 2.2 stadium truck size tire on this vehicle. I think that's going to give it the most realistic type of look. Originally I bought some of these tires for it, hoping that they would work, but because they're a buggy based tire, I still feel like they just look too small and they get lost. I may try to use these tires on the Mustang. I think on that vehicle they look a little bit better. Now, another important part of this whole process in terms of making this look realistic is to find a wheel and tire package that not only has the right overall diameter, but has the right offset. And that turned out to be pretty difficult on this car as well. If I went with the standard team associated wheels, they ended up sticking out too far and the tires would stick out of the body and just didn't look right. If I went down to the buggy style width, then they pulled them in too far and also didn't look right. So what I ended up having to do was go with a Losi style stadium truck wheel. This Losi style wheel gives me just the right offset that I'm looking for. The problem with going with the Losi style wheel is that because it tucks in farther on the front, I've severely limited my steering angle. So I've still got to come up with a solution to that. Plus there's just the matter of these being a pretty ugly wheel. What I'm hoping to be able to do is to design and print a wheel that looks like a stock IROC wheel with the 2.2 inch size on the outside and maybe up to a 3 inch size on the inside. I'll have to cut the tires for them to fit, but that'll give me the extra room I need for my steering components, but still give me the overall look that I'm after. That's a work in progress. I'm still gonna have to figure out how to get that. Keep an eye open in a future video for that one. In the meantime, for the mock-up, I'm going to get myself a set of 2.2 inch stadium truck tires, get them mounted on here, and keep moving forward. I could also swap to another set of drag race wheels and tires just for those times that we go out and drag race. Now, moving on to some of the other differences between these vehicles. As I mentioned before, the Mustang is using the buggy width components and the Camaro is going to be using the short course width components. Now, in addition to the axles and the arms, that also includes the towers and the shocks. So we've got a pretty different setup here. One of the other really big differences right now between these vehicles is that the Camaro has the front and rear bumpers where the Mustang doesn't. The reason that I've got the bumpers on this vehicle is that Camaro body is really pretty thin, and I really felt like I needed that support up front in order to protect the body as well as to help prevent it from collapsing under the wind resistance at higher speeds. If it collapses, that could end up in some very unpredictable handling. Now, in order to make this bumper, I bought a front bumper from a Traxxas X01, and I made a couple of Kydex mounts for it. You can see this piece on the front here is just a piece of Kydex that's been bent in one spot and mounted right to the short course bumper mount. On the underside, we've got something similar. You can see it's a little bit more complex, but it's still just a single piece of Kydex that I bent up. And I've got one set of screws with lock nuts that are clamping those two pieces together. In order to fill the larger hole inside of this bumper, I did 3D print a cylinder that slides right in and has the holes for the screws. On the rear, we've got a bumper from a Traxxas rally car. As of right now, I've just got it wire tied into position just to see if I like the fitment. I'm not totally sure if I'm going to keep this or if I'm going to get rid of it and put a wheelie bar mount in. Those are things I've got to work through. If I decide to keep it, I'll probably come up with a little bit better mounting scheme. On this vehicle, if I put this body back on, you can see that there's a whole lot of empty space up front. My front of the buggy ends about right here, so that's a solid 3 inches of absolutely no support. If you were to hit something, especially at high speeds, there's probably still a good chance that you're going to destroy the body. So I'm expecting that I'll wind up making a front bumper for this. If you guys are interested in seeing the step-by-step of how that bumper is made, from cutting and fitting it to the body, and then using the Kydex to make those custom mounts, let me know in the comments below. I think that type of custom fabrication is a great example of the do-it-yourself approach that most RCers take, and it's not really very difficult if you've got some patience. So if you want to see that, let me know in the comments below. So like I mentioned before, in addition to just using these as a no-prep drag car, I'm also hoping to use these as more of a GT or touring car style format like you would find with an A-scale GT vehicle. That's why I want to keep kind of a normal wheel and tire package on this vehicle. And for the Mustang, I've also been experimenting with some buggy-sized tires. In addition to using them as a drag car, I'm really hoping to get more bang for my buck by having them be more of a dual purpose vehicle, especially because I'm trying to make these as realistic looking as possible. It would really be fun to just use these as kind of an 8th scale on-road type of car. In fact, I'm really hoping to do sort of a chase scene type of video with these vehicles in addition to using them as drag vehicles. Even though nobody actually watches them, I really enjoy making those types of running videos, especially if there's some sort of a theme to it. What makes it so much fun is that I can involve my kids and involve some friends in the making of those videos, and that really makes it a lot of fun, even if nobody watches them. In any case, guys, I guess that's about it. If you guys are interested in keeping up with what's going on with these, make sure you follow me on Instagram and on Facebook, and make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel if you haven't already. Click the notification bell, that way you'll know when I'm posting new videos. Additionally, if you enjoyed watching this video, go ahead and give me a like to let me know. And if you have any questions or comments, make sure you post those below too. Until then, guys, make sure you keep going in a straight line.